Webster Tarpley is coming up in the gauntlet, up next. He's Ron Paul demonization campaign. All lined up. The truth matter.
Just the truth.
Just the veritas.
Just the facts.
Is it yours?
And that water is mine too.
Hold that for a minute. All right, let me just say this first. Webster Tarpley is a great political mind. He has a master's in, economy. He's an economist, but he also has a doctorate in history. Very smart guy. I've done my own research. His perspective on history is dead on. He has had an obsession with Ron Paul in the last 6 months. I'm a cockroach, you name it. And now, even though Ron Paul, yeah, I heard it. Even though Ron Paul, okay, we're going to go to you in a minute, Webster. Even though Ron Paul is now not even, obviously in the running now because election fraud and things, he obsesses on what the Huffington Post, Salon, and all the big foundation groups have put out. When they came out and confronted me this week, they said, well, the founder of PayPal is giving him millions. As Ron Paul said 6 months ago, I have no control over who gives me money. Yes, one member of the Bilderberg group gives me money, but the rest of them tax him. They want big government for corporate welfare. But I like Tarpley, and if he wants to obsess over Ron Paul, that's fine. So you can go over that first, because I like Tarpley. Okay? But then I'd like to ask Tarpley about what he really knows about the first Russian in modern history at Bilderberg, Kasparov, all the things that means, the fact that no fan of Russia or China, but compared to our criminal government, there's no doubt the West is trying to start a thermonuclear war. There's no doubt they're moving weapons in. Medvedev and Putin have said they'll nuke the West. There's no doubt they're using al-Qaeda in Syria. There's no doubt they took over Libya, and Webster had the courage to go there and cover that. I respect Webster for his courage. I really do, and I think this Ron Paul obsession is a dead letter. But he wants to talk about it. We're going to cover it. So can we just spend 5 minutes on that? And then I really want to take on things that I know you're accurate on. But again, to say that one Bilderberg, because they want to co-opt the libertarian movement to try to privatize things, not real privatization, but have government takeover of something, and then corporations act as government. That's not what Ron Paul stands for. Webster's point, though, about Rand meeting with Mitt Romney, I knew that Romney and them were talking about that. I knew that was being discussed. And Rand told me on and off, he said, well, I won't compromise on my ideals, so that's the difference. I probably won't even get it. Webster sees that as total proof of a sellout. I know the system and the establishment demonizes Ron Paul. I know from our moles inside, including people in security and other places, I'll leave it at that, that when they pull up, they see us as Ron Paul supporters out there protesting them, and they say, I hope that, Ron Paul dies in a plane crash. I mean, that's a real source. That's real stuff. I didn't just go from Tucker, who I trust, because he's proven stuff. I called my people, and they said, well, we didn't hear that, but yeah, they cuss Ron Paul. And then Webster jokes and says, oh, my source is the major pensions. They hate him. They don't get pensions working at the Marriott. Yeah, whatever. The precious food stamps. Look at the stuff. The point is you're getting us dependent on the bankers. The point is get into your Ron Paul stuff, but then I want to lead into the other areas. So Webster, Richard Reeves, doing a great job, is going to hold the mic over there. And we are streaming out on two systems, Infowars.com, PrisonPlanet.tv. Ron Paul, the enemy of humanity. Tell us about it.
Well, let's actually start with Rand Paul, right? You seem to think that Rand Paul has some kind of integrity. My information is that Rand Paul made a pilgrimage secretly to the offices of the Weekly Standard and essentially deal with William Crystal that Rand Paul would commit to being open to an attack on Iran, which he is in public. He says that he's willing to entertain an attack on Iran, and that he would vote for economic warfare measures against Iran. Now, we've just had Ron and Paul flirting in public with Romney, and he's obviously making a bid for the vice presidential spot. Now, based on the Bilderberger group here, looks like Mitch Daniels is in the line ahead of Rand Paul. But even so, we should remember that the whole idea of the Ron Paul campaign was to get Rand as vice president. In other words, if you've been knocking yourself out, sweating blood, giving money bombs and whatever it is, to Ron Paul, you got to realize that the whole purpose of that is to get Rand on the Republican ticket for vice president, because even though he has no qualifications, he thinks he should be president. It reminds me of other people that we've passed. The fact is, though, that Romney has now gone over the 1144 mark on his own power, so he won't need Ron Paul at the convention to transfer the delegates to him. So at that point, Rand...
My was is that Romney reached out to Rand. I mean, Rand shouldn't meet with him?
It's the deal in the background. Now let's talk about the deal. The deal is that Romney is a weak candidate, and he knows it.
He needs conservative credentials.
He's got to have two wingmen. He's got to have a left-wing man. That was his cousin Huntsman. Huntsman being this Mormon billionaire. So Huntsman was the main purpose in those debates, was to run interference for Romney, to fend off attacks, and whoever was the main enemy of Romney at the time, whether it was Bachmann or Kane or Perry or Gingrich or Santorum, whoever it was, the main activity of Ron Paul was to attack Romney's main enemy at any given time. He also did other services. In Virginia primary, here we are in Virginia, we had a primary. This was a head-on, a one-to-one primary, Paul against Romney. Ron Paul punted. He wouldn't campaign because he was afraid of defeating Romney. Now, that might have caused the collapse of the Romney campaign. So Ron Paul's goal is to keep Romney as the leading candidate, but at the same time get enough delegates so that he is indispensable for Romney. And he wasn't able to thread a couple of other things. Romney wanted to avoid debates. The Georgia debate was aborted because Romney said he didn't want to go. Ron Paul agreed he didn't want to go. The debate, same story, didn't want to go. So Ron Paul is a kind of an auxiliary to the entire Romney campaign.
That was always a talking point. What's your proof?
This is my discovery. I was out of the gate on the 10th of January with this, the 10th of January. My proof is, if you watch those Republican debates and you can't see that Romney is there to be is being helped by Ron Paul, you don't have any political judgment. In other words,
Paul ran 5 different ads against me. That was an establishment Democratic talking point.
This was the first one. It was mild. It was that he was a flip-flopper. Everybody else was a criminal or whatever he was. They are. But Romney was only a flip-flopper. Let's take the Michigan primary. The function of Ron Paul is to take 10 or 15% of anti-establishment Republican voters and put them in the deep freeze. Put them in the candidate who's never going to win, can't get the nomination. Romney's problem was that the Republicans maybe 40% people, you know, country club, plutocrats, whatever, who would vote for Romney. That leaves 50, 60% who would vote for an anti-candidate. So what Ron Paul does is take 15%, sometimes 17% of the anti-establishment Republican votes off the table. Now, Michigan primary, look at a couple of others, but Michigan is the clearest. Romney won Michigan by a paper-thin margin. That's the Ron Paul effect. Now, Ron Paul didn't win Michigan, but he did pay with his money for anti-Santorum election ads. So you're in the presence of a deception operation. This is not real. Ron Paul is famous as a nepotist. My figures are that he's got 60 people plus of his relatives on the congressional office payroll or on the payroll of his campaign. Jesse Benton, that a lot of people in the Ron Paul campaign tell me they can't stand, is to Ron Paul's granddaughter, I believe, right? And remember, the entire purpose of the campaign is nepotism. It's to feather the nest for little Rand so that he has a future. And again, let's look at who this is. This is Romney. Now, people, I think the better people who are interested in Ron Paul, they don't really understand economics, although they should.
So Obama's going to save us?
No. The Bilderberg people are turning for Romney, Mitch Daniels. But they just...
The word I've got is Romney is in from all the big power brokers.
But that's the Bilderberg. Bilderberg is throwing their weight, which is considerable, on the side of Romney, Mitch Daniels. But now you want to get me away from this this last point that I had.
I'm not trying to get you away from anything, Webster. I came over here to interview Jim Hooker, and I nicely, you're my friend. I said I'd interview you. You were interrupting, telling me shut up, and now you're saying I want to keep you from the audience. That's bullshit. Now listen, that's bullshit. No. I'm just saying, I'm interviewing you. I'm not trying to censor you, but I have views on all this. That's all. For heaven's sakes, I'm not trying to shut you down. Make your point. I want to get your point on Al-Qaeda, Syria, Libya, Russia, the Russian at the meeting. I want to talk about that instead of this obsession about Ron Paul.
A vote for Ron Paul was a vote for Romney, and this is the tragic reality, and I sympathize with people who were duped in this regard. Remember, Ron Paul runs as an anti-war candidate, even though he voted for the Afghan war. Everybody should remember, Ron Paul voted for the Afghan war. Like Kerry, he was for the Afghan war before he was against it. Now he's against it. Now let's look at Romney. If you're supporting Romney, what are you going to get? The biggest warmonger. Romney is out there saying that Russia is the main strategic enemy of the United States, and Romney is out there saying that he doesn't want the option to attack Iran on the table. He wants it in his hand. A vote for...
Well, there you go, Webster. Ron Paul's a warmonger. 2 days after 9/11, he says, okay, use of force to Afghanistan to get bin Laden. Now you're saying he's a warmonger. He's been against all these damn wars.
He voted for the Afghan war. Barbara Lee voted
I think this is sophistic, Tarpley. I'm very embarrassed.
Against it. Ron Paul voted for it. You look for a statesman, Barbara Lee is a statesman. Ron Paul didn't make the grade.
The difference is you have a belief in the state to empower. Ron Paul doesn't.
You're dodging the issue. If the big thing with Ron Paul is that he's against imperialist wars, how come he voted for the Afghan war? Where's the beef? Now, underlying all this, right? We're talking about the Mormons, okay? An important issue. The theology of the Mormons is that they are anti-black. The holy books. Yeah, right. The holy books of the Mormon Church say that the black population, Afro-Americans, are the spawn of the people who sided with Lucifer in the great battle in heaven. This was then taken away in 1978. I would say that Ron Paul represents the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which means the old Confederates.
Mason first group, some good, some bad. There's no proof of Ron Paul in Masonry. You are pulling out. Why are the globalists so upset at Ron Paul?
The daughters are in the Rainbow Girls. The parents are all Freemasons. I think there's a pretty good case.
Proof of that? They never produced the proof on that. You're going off rumors, Tarpley.
I think that's pretty good research. Anyway, let him.
So now, I thought you liked the American system. I'm not endorsing the Masons, but George Washington, all those guys. Now, if you're a Mason, you're the devil.
Not the devil, but when you put that together with the rest of this stuff, what I see, I see a convergence between the Scottish Rite Freemasons, Mormonism, which is a religion which has profound Freemasonic overtones.
It is a Masonic religion.
Yeah, I think there is this element to it, yes. So, right now we have Rand Paul flirting with Romney in public, and if I were a Ron Paul supporter, my worldview would be crashing to the ground right now. After all that work and all sacrifices. Now, Alex, let me talk to you.
Be sure that states' rights movement is destroyed.
Let me talk, yeah. States' rights has always been a reactionary slogan. States' right.
Only the federal supreme government will save us for Soviet recollectivization. Yes, only Sovietism will save us.
Yeah, come on. This is serious now. No, I'm almost finished. I'm almost finished. If I could just remember what the last point was. 0.7. Oh.
Brain buggers.
Look, to talk then about Ron Paul's economics, let's get down. The thing that got me going on, Ron Paul made a terrible mistake. He published his economic views on his website in the Restore America program. Now, Ron Paul, when he gets up on the stump, Ron Paul can dance and bob and weave and shuffle with the best of them. But when he puts the numbers on the page, let's look at the United States. You got about 50 people who, thanks to Bill Clinton,
he said it's going to be slowly
are in.
No one can say independence has been successful.
No. He talks about $1 trillion in cuts in $1 trillion in cuts in the first year, and then balance the budget.
Bankers, they don't want that. They want us to.
They seem to want it. Quite a few of them do want it. Peter Thiel is a pretty banker, and he seems to think it's great.
He's only one member.
I don't know how many you need. Come on, you got to stop this stuff.
Your obsession with Ron Paul.
It's not. No, your obsession with defending him.
No,
let me talk to you. You are better than Ron Paul. You don't need Ron Paul. Let's take an issue like 9/11. You have stuck to your guns on 9/11 truth.
Since you brought that up, Paul was asked 4 years ago about it, and he said, well, he's been so busy he hasn't been able to deal with it, but he knows about false flag. Let me talk. It's okay if I talk. You asked me a question. I've given you like 5 minutes at a time, Tarpley. Ron Paul, he knows false flag terror is real. There's been a CIA coup. All of that. Ron Paul, I know him.
Did he say that on the presidential debates?
He said that on my show and others. I know Ron Paul's family, man. Ron Paul is good. All I know is there's bigger. Why are you so obsessed with Ron Paul?
Because I see lots of people who are useful and productive people.
Useful idiots for your Soviet model?
Who are getting hijacked by a flim-flammer.
All right.
Ron Paul is the most successful
60 seconds on your obsession with him, because I want to get to all these other issues. Oh, really? Only Ron Paul. In the entire galaxy, it's all Ron Paul. Not Syria, not Libya, not Russia, not NATO, not Europe collapsing, not the pigs being sucked dry. Ron Paul, he's so evil, he's so bad. Tarpley, he'll save us, along with the communists.
You are undercutting. If you want to protest Bilderberg, I would say to you, go out there and say Ron Paul. I know a lot of people, including myself, who say, I don't want to hear about any reactionary Republican for the rest of my life.
I want a good communist candidate.
I don't want any of them. I know a lot of people who, after Bush, swore that they would never vote for a reactionary Republican for 10,000 years. And now,
hey, I'm against power structure. Can we now move on to the next? Can we now move on to the next?
Why do we have to be tied to a cynical politician?
Webster, I exposed Obama. I exposed Bush.
But you're running interference for Ron Paul, and he's running interference for Romney. Where does that leave you?
Listen, Romney's an unknown country. I've exposed his ties to Bain, all of it. Now listen, stop right there. Finish up with your Ron Paul thing. Let's move on to the next subject. Go ahead. Hold that. Go ahead.
A vote for Ron Paul was a vote for Romney.
So you love Obama.
So you're no. I take second place.
Move on from the Ron Paul.
I take second place to nobody. I was the first out of the gate. I was the first, I think, in the relevant universe to expose Obama. So I have the credential. In other words, I was telling left liberals in 2008, you're being duped. Watch out. Today, I tell people like you, you're being duped by Ron Paul. Spit. Same story.
Move on to the next issue.
I suppose. Now, let me just talk about your triumphalism, right? What you're saying that the Patriot movement is whatever this is.
Oh, we're failing. You're such a good friend of liberty.
Let's talk about something real.
Live feed soon. You better get other subjects.
Okay. Let's talk about what it takes. You want to break the power of finance capitalism, because that's what Bilderberg is.
Got like 10 minutes on batteries.
Bilderberg is finance capitalism in NATO framework.
What is
you
it?
want to break.
Centralized government.
You want to break their power, you better find an example that works. Now, Ron Paul doesn't work. Ron Paul doesn't work. Adbusters. Adbusters. Come on, you got to stop heckling like that.
I'm just joking, Webster.
Yeah,
now I got to air in. Get into the other issues.
Yeah,
I
am.
how bad Ron Paul is.
So not Ron Paul and not Occupy Wall Street are effective. What is effective? Let's look at Greece. The Syriza movement of Alexis Tsipras. That has gone from 4% to 30%. One of the big themes that's going on in this Bilderberger meeting is that they are terrified of Alexis Tsipras and the Syriza movement. Why? Because he has all the things we don't have. They have a leader, that's Tsipras himself. They have an organization, that is the Syriza, which is 12 components that have now been welded together into the most fighting force in the country. They now have a program. Let's go through the program. It's not like Ron Paul's. It says, roll back austerity, no wage cuts, no pension cuts. If public workers are fired, hire them again. Second point, stop anti-worker measures, stop union busting. Rand Paul and Ron for union busting, right? They're scabbing on every union in the country. But in Syriza, it's the opposite. Third point, social justice. I know some people think that's a terrible thing. Fourth point, investigate the crash, put the felon bankers in jail. And the fifth point, debt moratorium. Don't pay Goldman Sachs, don't pay Morgan Stanley, don't pay J.P. Morgan Chase.
This is all fraud. It's all fraud.
This is what the bankers hate and fear. This is what is winning in Greece. Now, if you want to break the power of finance capital, you've got to have something on that along those lines. I would say one of the main themes being debated in here is the question of whether there'll be a coup d'etat in the next 2 weeks. The elections are on June 17th. Right now, Syriza will emerge as the largest party. The trick of the Greek parliament is if you come in first, you get 50 votes extra. You get a bonus for coming in first. If they do, we will have essentially the first anti-banker government in the Western world.
No, Iceland.
They never had an anti-banker government.
But
they never had it.
They threw it out.
They had a social democrat who was finding ways to... The other thing about Iceland, the stuff about Iceland is baloney. You know why? Because the living standard in Iceland has been cut in half. The devaluation of the Icelandic crown cut the living standard in half. So if you want to be serious about breaking the power of the bankers, you better have those 5 things: a leader, an organization, a program, I guess it's 4, and a strategy. And the strategy is no austerity, no deals, don't enter into any austerity coalitions. Now, the other thing is, you're concerned about dictator. I'll tell you how dictatorship comes. One way is what we just saw in Greece, right?